Recording.
Okay. We're recording now. We can start. So in the meeting notes, I added Josh's issue where he brought up this issue where service controllers have a race condition, Josh, do you want to explain it further?
Yeah, so basically there's a node sync loop that runs to check when like a node is changed up to the load balancer, and there's another loop that processes server updates. On one point in time, you can have both of them acting on the same load balancer. It mainly usually happens like when creation or if the service changes for some reason. But I did notice that, so I wanted to try to address it, and sounds like both of us have a possible solution that's cleaner. Do you want to go over yours?
Oh, my solution is that in the service informer sends an update every 30 seconds or every resync period, even if the service is not updated. And on every update, if we call ensure load balancer, then eventually, even if there's a race condition at one given point, eventually it'll become consistent. And the change required to do that is a single change in this line, where I've sent it on the chat. In that line, if you just update, where it says only if needs update, you call enqueue. If you enqueue even if it doesn't need an update, then that'll solve our problem.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is then people are still getting ensure called a lot. So what I was thinking was, if we enqueue the service from the node sync, what we can do is actually check to see if you call that needs update method, that doesn't check hosts. So if that fails and it comes from the queue, that means it needs a host update.
Can you repeat that? So
if we take away that line you just said, ensure load balancer will be called very often, which people wanted to avoid.
Yeah.
So instead, in the node sync loop, if we add every service to the queue,
right,
and then the worker, we check to see if it needs an update, where needs update only checks the service. It doesn't check if the nodes have changed. So if that fails, that means the service is fine, and we only need to call update load balancer, which updates the hosts, not ensure load balancer. So everyone's still happy performance-wise. I haven't tested that, but that's what I was thinking would be an easy approach.
So okay. So then ensure load balancer would call, the node sync would put it back into the queue, and then from the queue, you want to call a needs update?
Yeah, you would just check that to see if the service actually needs an update. If the service needs an update, then we need to call ensure load balancer. And if it doesn't, then we just call update load balancer because only the hosts have changed.
That makes sense, but the race condition would still exist if you get the events in the wrong order.
Well, the queue will handle the race condition because the queue only lets one service be acted upon at a time by a worker. So if the node sync,
but then the node sync and the informers are still racing.
So the node sync is just adding it to the queue, though. So like there is maybe the key could be added twice, but it's gonna be the same key, so that doesn't matter.
No, I understand, but the node sync can go before the informer or after the informer. There's still that race condition, right? Even going into the queue.
So there's a race condition going into the queue, but there's not a race condition where multiple Go routines can be updating at the same time, which is what I want to avoid. So I'd rather have 2 synchronous calls than 2 concurrent calls. Because update load balancer is cheap. That's why it was created. It's because you can just check the hosts.
But ensure already checks. So I think we make some assumptions on ensure where we say that if it already exists, then don't create it again. And then ensure is not that expensive. And the race condition that I thought you were talking about was where node sync provides a new set of hosts, and at the same time a service update happens.
Which is one. That's what the race condition is. So like putting them all in the service queue would alleviate that. you may have a chance where like the node sync will add the service to be processed after it was already added to be insured, but that removes the race condition there, because regardless, it's going to get the right state.
Okay, so is there an assumption that update only updates the hosts?
Yes, it's named incorrectly, but the docs say only updates hosts.
Okay. As long as it's documented, I think that sounds great. I think that'll
Okay.
solve the problem.
Sweet.
All right. So are you going to implement that, or do we
Yeah,
just?
I'm working on the finalizer one first. I'm hoping to have that by like Monday, and then I'll work on that one.
Cool. Thanks. This
No
is a really important issue, I think. So let me go back to the doc, and yeah, I wanted to talk about the external plugin flag that is being introduced to load volume plugins while running external cloud provider. Walter, do you want to just give an introduction to that?
Sure, and there's two ways to go about it, and I'm not convinced which way we want to do the flagging, but the central issue here is that right now we use the presence of the plugin to sort of determine which business logic to run in the controller manager. And in the end state, that may make some sense, but in the short term, we have this problem where we have things like the volume plugin, which for the 7 providers that are sort of in tree, they still need to have that plugin, but if they have the plugin, then we're not properly running in external mode. So the idea had been to separate out the flag which determines which controller loops get run from which plugin is done. In an attempt to be backward compatible, and I'm not sure it's the cleanest looking, but it gets us, I thought, a better backward compatibility story. We have one flag that says plugin, but can also say external. And so what I've done is said, if it's external, then here is this extra flag that says, okay, but here is which plugin to really, you can optionally then still load an additional plugin, so that someone like Google or Amazon can set it to be external, have that affect which controller loops, and then still load the plugin for purposes of the volume and anything else which still needs a cloud provider right now in the Cube controller manager. Does that make sense?
So having this would make it possible to create, for example, AWS EBS volumes with
Exactly.
running an external CCM, right?
Exactly. Yes. So that is the intent, and in addition, at some level, when I was first thinking about it, it seemed like it would be cleaner to just have something that said, "Hey, which controller loop mode do I want to run in?" But that seemed like it would be permanent, and also then you have this backward compatibility problem where external has to now moved into a different flag, and then you have 2 permanent flags. My hope is that the new flag that I've introduced in the meantime will eventually just go away, because once volumes move out, we no longer need cloud running in the KCM, and we can just deprecate and kill that flag.
Yeah, so then only the attach-detach controller in the KCM will enable in-tree cloud provider things.
Yeah, and in fact, my hope is, I don't know if I've shared it. I know I shared it. I think I shared it with Sid, but I should share it with the whole working group if I haven't already. I sat down with, in fact, I thought I had, with the SIG volume, and went over with it. And essentially, I'm fairly certain that once they ship CSI to beta, we can just get rid. There's a couple of things we can try and do to do it earlier, but at minimum, when CSI comes out, all of the cloud provider specific volumes can be taken out of KCM.
That's really cool. CSI is targeted at alpha in 1.9, right?
Alpha in 1.9. However, it didn't sound like the best possible, most optimistic possibility would be beta in Q2 or at like 1.11, more probably 1.12.
Okay, yeah. But anyway, it's exciting to see, at least on an alpha level, so we can start prototyping things.
Absolutely.
I had one concern about this. The name, the flag name, external plugin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can see how. I mean, maybe I was expecting something like, maybe if the flag said something like external cloud volume plugin, that would be more meaningful for a user.
Naming is hard, and I am not attached to this name.
Okay. Does anyone have any suggestions about it? Any thoughts?
So actually, I like your suggestion. I think it makes a lot of sense where we want to be at the end of 1.9. Right now, it's actually doing a little more than there are going to be at least a week or two, and I'm hoping no more than that, where it's going to be doing more than volume. Right now, the node controller also needs it for the 7-in tree. I'm trying to get that fixed before 1.9 code freezes, but yeah, I mean that I think you're right. I think the goal is for it to be the cloud volume plugin.
Cool.
Okay.
Go on, please.
Oh, I was done at that point.
Okay. So is it only GCE and AWS that actually need this, or are there other clouds as well that need the volume plugin thing?
Microsoft and Azure, I know, need it.
Oh, yeah.
Of the other 4, I'm not certain.
Okay, but at least these, I mean, the 3 major need it anyway, so it's kind of substantial.
Yep.
Yeah, I like the external cloud volume plugin naming thing. We might want to have some alpha, or maybe not even alpha, because we want to get it beta, right?
Yeah, I mean,
but
yeah, the plugin. This flag is basically there while we migrate volume out, and then hopefully it goes away.
Yeah. So then you mentioned that the node controller needs cloud right now inside of the KCM. Why is that? I thought we could move out it, but
I'm working on moving it out. So right now, there's a CIDR lookup which you'll find in the IPAM portion of the node controller, and in the lifecycle portion of the node controller, there is also a call out to see if the node is we've lost touch with the node. There's a call out to the cloud to find out if the cloud still thinks the node is part of the cluster. So those are the 2 calls I know of inside the node controller.
Okay, but why can't they be run in the CCM on top of
that is my intent. Like I said, that is for the next couple of weeks until those PRs are finished and shipped.
Oh, I thought that it worked already, but seemingly not.
Oh no!
I have made changes to run the node controller in its entirety in the CCM, which works. But Tim Hawkin did not like that at all, and so a bunch of negotiating later, we came up with an agreement where we break the node controller into pieces, and the 2 pieces that need the cloud provider will then run in the CCM.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, then, so I was thinking of running completely in the CCM, but obviously, that it has the drawback of it has other drawbacks. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Absolutely. Cool. The next item on the agenda.
I did want to talk some about the conversation we had a few weeks ago at this point, the CI test suites for multiple cloud providers posting back to test grids such that we can get a good signal across multiple cloud providers in this brave new world that we're entering. And Lucas, you had said you have a mechanism in mind for enabling that. What I'm trying to figure out is we have some folks in SIG testing and our internal engprod group that correlate to that SIG testing group that are potentially available but need some direction on how to make progress there. So I was going to suggest if you could write down even early thoughts on that and share it, then maybe we can get some others in SIG testing to set up the machinery to make that work. How's that sound?
Yeah. So I've been away the 2 latest weeks maybe on, well, the time zones between US and Europe has has made meeting conflicts to myself. Yeah, I think that sounds good to do. I posted a project. I think I posted a link to it somewhere. Basically, looks at that / Kate's federated tests. That is like a really rough thing just for a proof of concept. I think like regarding engprod and SIG testing, it's really easy to, well, not really easy, but it's fairly straightforward to set up machines in Google, like GCE today, in the current testing suites, because like 90% or something, I don't know, the most part is running in GCE, so we have good machinery there. Mm-hmm. What I'm more worried about is like, how do we get these automatically running on Azure, for example, or whatever other cloud that might need to be tested. vSphere, for example, I have no idea how that actually works, like, right? Or what provisioning methods there are.
Well, I don't think that needs to be in scope for this group. I think what should be in scope is a description of where to post, what the parameters are, like how to get your cloud provider results to show up in that same dashboard. And if there are specific labels we need to add to it to get it to show up on a dashboard. This is the part that I'm not quite clear on.
Oh, yeah. So I think most of that is in the project or brief documentation repo. But I could definitely document it a bit better still, obviously.
And more than that, I think what would be most useful from my perspective, looking across multiple cloud providers, is some sort of summary. And I'm not sure if that means run only the conformance labeled tests and post a single pass-fail. But in many of these dashboards, and the signal is so hard to pull from the noise. What we're really looking for is actionable insight out of this effort. So the hope would be there's some reasonably stable test suite that can run that depends on the cloud provider specific code. And when running, there be, say, a dozen cloud providers, one row per cloud provider in a test grid dashboard. And when something breaks for one and only one, that row turns red and all the others remain green. And when something breaks all cloud providers, they would all turn red. And that's what I've seen useful when testing multiple components in a distributed way in the past. Any more detail than that, then people will either ignore it or it'll be too hard to figure out what it means. And so that's what I'm hoping we come out of it with.
Yeah. So I would guess we're using kubeadm like as the get Kubernetes bootstrap thing here, or at least similar.
I think, again,
tech.
It's going to end up varying by cloud provider, right? I think COPS doesn't use kubeadm yet, so
Not yet, yeah.
That will be an implementation detail, but the output is what's meaningful here. Is there's a new check-in, there's a new build, there's some triggers the test suite, and it either works or it doesn't, and that result needs to get posted back to what I think is a JSON file in a GCS bucket somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And then test grid is just a UI on top of those documents, right?
Yeah, it is.
So this is the general flow. I'd like to try and captures and then get 3 or 4 cloud providers participating and a onboarding document. And then I think initially, at least, it can be up to individual cloud providers to get through the initial aspect. Later, when there's a cluster API and there's more uniformity across setting up clusters and so on and so forth, they may converge more, but I think initially it'll be configured in different ways.
Yeah, what's going to be, what may be the hardest part here is finding the right EDE tests, because from what I know, they aren't, like, not all cloud provider specific functionality is EDE that's tested, right? So we don't have a AWS tag, right? Or something that we could use to test.
My hunch is that the easiest path is to try and overlap with the conformance tests. And
so the conformance tests
out of that, which one is there are no surprises in what are the conformance tests, and my hope is we inspire some consistency across the cloud providers, what we expect to work.
Yeah, so the conformance tests are really, really lightweight, though.
Oh, they're horribly insufficient today.
Yeah.
More effort going into that, but there hasn't been any good incentive to add some very thoughtfully designed end-to-end test into the conformance suite so far. But my hope would be that this would be the smoke test that means, yes, its basic functionality is working. If there are performance requirements, that they would be lax enough that wouldn't make them flaky, that kind of thing. Maybe it's not the right path, but there's a lot to do, and anywhere we can collaborate with other folks making similar progress, we should try and do that. So that's why I came up with that thought.
Yeah.
And also, I would say the mechanism, the machinery, getting it running on CI/CD, letting individual cloud providers figure out how to iterate on how to observe check-ins and how frequently to run them and what is the right frequency is, I think, more important than the test coverage initially. Getting that set up and then incrementally adding coverage over time would be my preference.
Yeah, that makes sense indeed. To start with, like, the conformance suite, which is 0 to little coverage of the actual cloud provider functionality, and then as we go, pivot into something more useful. But for sure, the actual, like, what API to use for the GCS buckets will be in this K8s federated test project. Okay. I can add some more information there soonish and say what you need to do. And then I just think we should start with, like, we should find an owner, start with GC or start with, I mean, if we could find a person, I'm happy to get things off the ground, guide that person to what to do, right? And once we have the first provider, we could then write up a better doc, like what is actually needed once we have done it, right? Rather than spending, for me, time, like much time on documenting, then finding that it was totally the opposite thing we needed to do for this whatever scenario. So
Sure.
Yeah.
So my understanding is somewhat incomplete, but I would love to find, Google will participate, but all of our tests go to TestGrid anyway, running on GCE. So I think it's not as useful a demonstration of some other cloud posting back to those results. So we could maybe start with 2, Google and 1 other would be my hope. Is anyone up for participating in that? Okay, I will try to find an owner and ask around if we can find someone else.
I'll ask around from someone as well that might be interested.
Okay, great.
We'll have a chat internally, re-Oracle. There's some stuff going on next kind of couple of weeks that might feed back into it, so that there is a possibility there as well.
Okay, great. I mean, my hope is eventually this is useful enough, so I think early investment would hopefully be a not wasted effort or completely selfless act. It would also drive value, so you can see if somebody else does something that breaks your own cloud provider implementation, you learn about it earlier. So.
Oh yeah, definitely see the value. Just a case of finding someone to take it on.
Understood. Okay, was there anything else? I think we're just about out of time. So,
just, do we know if Andrew is working on the kubelet, the address ordering of the kubelet should wait for the cloud to populate addresses instead of going ahead and registering itself with incomplete addresses. Do we know if he's working on that?
He said he was going to work on it, but he hasn't. In the last 2 weeks, we haven't spoken to him, so we can find out.
I'll follow up on that, as that is something we really need for 1.9.
Okay. I had one request from Signode. They were asking if we could please make every cloud API or in the cloud interface always take a context object, sort of as a future-proofing measure. So I haven't spent much time thinking about it, but they did ask that we think about it.
Maybe send an email out to the working group.
Yeah, I was planning on doing it, but I figured since we had a minute or two, I'd at least mention it.
Yeah, probably as it becomes this more library, not implementation thing. But yeah,
Yep.
Having context is best practice. So why not?
Exactly.
Cool.
All right.
okay, gang, I gotta run, so disconnecting. Thank you all, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, guys.